voice. But whenever I try to quiet my voice, it sounds like I'm falling asleep. So we're going to try to do this without disrupting everybody else in this Baltimore airport. Shout out to DeMarcus, a Baltimore airport worker who listens to Payne and Pendergast. I saw him as I was on a moving walkway. He was coming one way, I was the other. And he looked up and he recognized me. And usually when that happens outside of Houston, they actually think that they're seeing John Rocker or the dude from The Office or something. But he said, Seth. So shout out to DeMarcus if you're watching this. Three burning questions for this 49ers game as the Texans find themselves in what seems like almost like crisis mode, not just because of the record, but because of things that are starting to seep out or speculation or just curiosities in the messaging that we're receiving. So that will be one of my big questions. But just to start off with the pure football side of things, can this Texans offense, A, just make overall improvement, but B, do it against this Robert Saleh-led defense that's banged up, as we know. Uh, Bryce Huff, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, they were all out last week, and that defense did really well versus the Falcons. That was a week after the Falcons had really put one on the Bills. The big thing that's interesting about that is that much like D'Amico, Robert Saleh doesn't like to blitz a whole lot. He'd love to get it done with four guys up front. They blitzed the Falcons a lot. So what happened last week against the Texans? Hey, Seahawks, they never blitz. Four-man rush all the time. One of the lowest blitz rates in the league. Tracer bullets everywhere. So that's Brandon says was hoping to see a couple of our management staff at the terminal being set out of town. No, the biggest question is, yeah, can they both protect CJ? Can CJ do a good job of recognizing blitz? I think they learned their lesson last week that just because a defense doesn't typically blitz a lot doesn't mean they're not going to release the hounds when you have trouble picking up the blitz. And it's the entire operation. It's the offensive line, certainly. It's the wide receivers adjusting and being exactly where they need to be. And it's on CJ where I think, with enough distance between that game and now and having watched it enough times that it's at the point now where there's times where you can't blame the pass rush. It's CJ not under pressure with an inaccurate throw or perhaps not making the best decisions. But is it the cumulative? Is it the cumulative trauma of him just being under duress and things not being quite right? I think that's the likely explanation. Now, it's not like accurate quarterbacks all of a sudden become inaccurate. It's just when things are unstable all the time, it's really tough. So, at the very least, they learned their lesson about not anticipating blitz when you're going to get blitz. This is a 49ers defense that put a whole lot of blitzes on film last week. They're banged up in their secondary as well. But it's at home, better environment, all of that. Second question, can the defense bring out the worst version of Mac Jones? And that's what I'm really banking on in this game. I think that's why the Texans are 1.5 to 2 point favorites, despite the general vibe being like, how the hell are they favorites? That Mac Jones has been playing very capably. The 49ers are winning. They've won a couple in, kind of a crazy circus fashion at the end. But it's really boils down to it's Kyle Shanahan. If Kyle Shanahan gets anybody who's close to being a viable quarterback, and you've got Christian McCaffrey at your disposal. They don't have the receivers out there. All the receivers are banged up. But the big difference last week was I think George Kittle coming back as well, because McCaffrey, who's on pace to break a record for number of touches, he's a running threat. He's a receiving threat. We know that. You add George Kittle back into the mix, and they were running the ball really effectively. McCaffrey's at like 3.3 yards per attempt on the season in the run game right now, but he was at like 4.9 or 5.0 yards per attempt last week. So they could be a much more potent rushing offense now with the return of Kittle. But the big thing about McCaffrey is, I know you worry about him in the open field. Last week, 3 of his receptions were on third down, and it was late in the down. He wasn't like they were designed routes to Christian McCaffrey. It was Mac Jones exhausting his options, then getting the ball to Christian McCaffrey, not necessarily even breaking a bunch of tackles or anything, but just being there as a viable threat. that's where the Texans' ability to generate pressure without blitzing is going to be paramount because you just got to keep guys out there in coverage because a third to a quarter to a third of their first down conversions will come by Christian McCaffrey just being a late option on there. Biggest question, third question, and I hate even talking about this at this point, except we have to. And I think the last time I talked about it on here was early in the week when D'Amico had just repeatedly said that when asked why didn't they play more aggressively against Jackson Smith and Jigba, he said our plan was to put hands on Jackson Smith and Jigba, and that's all we really got out of D'Amico. And then Derek Stingley, when asked about it, said that he's not the kind of player that doesn't play the play call, and if he's asked to play off, he's going to play off. So we're getting different messages. I've never looked at Derek Stingley as a guy that's going to go rogue. That's why it was such a shock that D'Amico seemed to be painting a picture of him going rogue. The gray area here is in that there's the play call and then there's the adjustments you want guys to make based on the game plan. And I think that's probably where either the miscommunication or a different view of things, including however Matt Burke was coaching it in the game and on the sideline and in the week before. I mean, it's not like just because D'Amico's not calling plays, it's not like he's uninvolved with the defense. So were there times where Kamari or Stingley or a combination of defensive backs were supposed to tweak things and go up and challenge him, and they didn't, but it wasn't necessarily by the play call? I don't know. I do know that the defense still played really well. As frustrated as I was with the second and third drives of the games last week, they took the ball away. If you include that, I'll include the block kick because it was Danico Autry. They took the ball away 4 times. They scored. They're still a very good defense. If they hadn't inherited 4 short fields, the score would have been reflected differently. So I'm not like if you go looking hard enough for dysfunction in any organization, you will find dysfunction, and that's the dicey part of things. Remember, there was a huge expose about the Patriots. I think it was in the Athletic long time ago. It was before they won their last Super Bowl. It was the preseason before they won their last Super Bowl. But to read the article and all the anonymous quotes, it was just it was a flaming disaster, and they could never. This was the year it was all going to fall apart. So if you go searching for dysfunction, you will find it, um, and it just doesn't tend to be as much of a worry when things are going well and when you're winning. So right now, it's not like it's at a fever pitch for me or anything, but it's something to keep an eye on. If the messaging in the press conferences is different than what the players feel their messages they're receiving are, yeah, that's an issue. And I would hope if it is an issue, let's see, shouldn't be shooting in an airport. Why not, Mike? No, you can't see anybody's faces behind me, other than the guy who was. I know the kid that was sweeping there. He's cool. Uh, so the other thing is, you can't unless am I breaking the law? Okay. Um, so there we go. By the way, tell me if the audio is coming through all right, guys. I'm not seeing all the comments. Um, it's just something to keep an eye on. And by the way, I had a rental Jeep here the last couple days. I got to tell you, I had a lot of fun driving this Wrangler. The Jeep Wave, pain in the ass. I don't need this. I don't need this kind of. I don't need this kind of the obligation. I'm generally. I like my alone time. Okay. I like to take my social contact in measured doses. And this damn Jeep Wave, and I'm not realizing it until somebody's almost passed me. So I'm like aggressively Jeep waving at people. Bothers me. Let me get to some of the actual comments here. I was talking about the tracers. Let's see. Get to the comments. Can't scroll through them well enough. Oh, there's just not that many comments. Sad. All right, everybody, enjoy your day. I'll try to get I'll try to get another live stream here at some point before the game. Might be right before the pregame show tomorrow. Everybody have a good.